Hello, everybody. Hello. All right, thank you for your patience. And yep, thank you for respecting the signing line. At the end, we will get you all your books signed. If anyone needs to leave before their book gets signed, you can always let the people at the front counter know, and we will help you out. Okay. I'm Alex. Thanks for coming and supporting your local independent bookstore. Your attendance and book sales help us have these events. This evening, we have the pleasure of hearing from Jasper Fforde about the long-awaited follow-up to Shades of Grey, its Red Side story.
Yes!
Jasper Fforde spent 20 years in the film business before debuting on the New York Times bestseller list with The Air Affair in 2001. Since then, he has written another 15 novels, including The Big Over Easy, The Constant Rabbit, and Shades of Grey. Fforde lives and works in his adopted nation of Wales. We hope you enjoy the event. Thank you again. Remember, you can still grab a copy of Red Side Story up front after the reading if you have not already. All right, and here we have Jasper Fforde.
Right. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
If I yeah, that's too low, isn't it? I'll stay up here, I think. Is that this easier, then you can see me? Yeah? Okay. Unless you don't want to see me. I don't know. You know. Yeah. Oh, you do? Thank you. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's what I'll do then. Right, well, thank you very much indeed for coming out to see me and all the really very, very pleasant things that you said just when we were talking over there. Yes, long awaited. Yes, thank you for that. You know, no pressure there. Long awaited. Well, I mean, you know, I could blame myself, you know, that I took a little too long to write the book, but I actually want to blame you.
Because we didn't keep asking.
No, it wasn't that you didn't keep asking. It's just I didn't feel you wanted it badly enough. I really didn't think, you know, you wanted it that badly. No, I mean, seriously. I mean, this is, you know, I'll sort of tell you sort of what happened. Just so I'm talking for an hour-ish, and I do like Q's and A's. I do like questions and answers. That's really, really good. So if you can think up some really good questions, some real left field stuff, or some really ordinary stuff as well, if you want, that'd be really good. So I'll just mention that now. So anyway. Tell you a little bit of sort of the background, I suppose, of maybe why it took so long to come up with a sequel. It wasn't me sort of thinking, you know, I've got no ideas, you know, like just sort of staring at an empty screen, you know. It was, I have lots of ideas. Ideas I find come quite easily. I think you'll probably notice that in my books, especially the Thursday books, there's a lot of ideas in there, a lot of ideas, and I just love that sort of, you know, concepts. I think, you know, what I really enjoy, I think about Douglas Adams was that sort of what I call conceptual zingers, you know, which is sort of, you know, most typified by the Babel fish. You know, it's just a little sort of small sort of parcel of perfection made out of words and concepts and ideas and illusion. And I think that's what I most enjoy about, you know, his writing. And that's, I've sort of brought that through, hopefully, you know, to my books. Anyway, so ideas are easy. So it wasn't a lack of ideas. It was, I think what happened was that the first 4 books I wrote were the first 4 books I got published, were the Thursday Next books. Right. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm working on TN8 at the moment. Right. So that's good news. Thursday Next 8, which will be called The Dark Reading Matter. Right. Because we've been leading up to it. If you noticed in TN7, in TN6 and in a bit of TN7, there is this notion that there is the dark reading matter, and that, you know, leading bookologists have sort of theorized that in fact the amount of reading material that is available to us and that we can actually see and we can read and we can experience is only like about 15 or 20% of the actual reading material that exists out there, and so the 80% of reading material is dark reading matter. We can't actually get to it, you know. And if we could, it'd be quite exciting. What actually makes up the dark reading matter, and that's sort of what I'm working on at the moment. But a whole lot of stuff besides. because it's quite interesting because we had the Ford Fiesta last weekend actually, which was really good. And that's great fun. And we did that, and it's a really good sort of weekend because everyone's really all my readers seem to be really polite, you know, and very pleasant and not at all, you know, like this. And so I'm very visible during the weekend. You know, I don't just sort of come in and then sort of, you know, allow people to touch the hem of my garment, you know, for like 10 minutes and then disappear away. You know, I'm there for the whole time, and I'll just sit down and chat with everyone, and it's great fun. And it's always like it's like when I come to talks like this, I bring something to it, obviously. But I always take things away because people say things and they make comments. And I was having this conversation at the Fiesta, just chatting away, and someone said, "Do you know what? Is Landon going to do a bit more in this book? You know, because I really like Landon, and I just feel, you know, he just hasn't saved the world on his own yet." And I was kind of thinking about that. And Landon is a good character because he's very supportive. You know, very supportive, but he's kind of there in the background, and he's totally okay with the role that he has within the family, you know. And I think maybe he just deserves a bit of something, you know. So I think maybe Landon's going to get a little bit more. But it's an interesting one because if the question comes up about, you know, writing, you know, strong female roles, and you go, yes, obviously that's important, but I think it's also important to have supportive male roles to the strong female role, and the males are okay about that, and really are very supportive and don't see there's anything unusual about it at all. And I think that's also really important as well. So, you know, and that's very much Landon, you know, very much Landon. Yeah. And he's meant to have had a writing career, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside. So maybe I think, what did I say? He won the Armitage Shanks Award, you know, like 25 years ago, you know, and it's all sort of a bit collapsed a bit since then. So maybe I'll have him write a book or something, I don't know. But anyway, we'll see. But where was I going with this?
Lots of ideas.
What was that? Ideas. Thank you. Yeah, that was a bit of a random sort of thing. Anyway, so yeah, I published the first in the TN4. That's what I was talking about. TN4, about TN8, TN4. So we published the TN4 books. They said to me, okay, what are we going to do next after with something wrong? And I said, well, I've got these two other books. Right, with police procedurals with nursery rhyme characters, right? Big Over Easy, Big Over Easy, and The Fourth Bear. And I really like those. And people often say to me now, because the question has switched, suddenly from when do we get Shades of Grey 2 to when do we get Nursery Crimes 3? And it's like, oh, you know, it's like, give me a break. You know,
you exist for us.
So
healthily or exercising.
Oh God. So I don't know, and it's because it's not an open series. I don't feel, you know, that I have to write a third in the series. I have a name for it. I had a title for it, The Last Great Tortoise Race, and it's sort of vaguely I know what's going on, you know, and I have some ideas with it, and eventually I think. Because Pandora's getting married to Prometheus still, if you follow the series, and we've got to have the wedding, and the wedding would be with all the Greek gods, you know, and there's that sort of embarrassing sort of thing in that scene, I think, in Four Weddings and a Funeral, where he's sitting down at a table and he's realised that he's slept with all the women on the table, and it's a little bit awkward. And I thought Zeus could have that, you know, because he did. And then he'd go, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry." And he'd get up from that table and he'd go to another table and it'd be exactly the same. So we can have some. I thought if you're making it sort of highbrow, a little bit sort of highbrow, sort of in jokes and highbrow. Luckily, my eldest daughter is actually a classicist, you know, so she can help me out with this a little bit, you know. Anyway, so and those were the first two books I wrote, actually, the two nursery crime books. They were my conventional books, my straight books, you know, that I thought would be really easy to get published, you know, real easy to get published. Absolutely not. No, they were roundly rejected. You know, it was the 90s. It was chicklit and ladlit, so you know there wasn't any room. You know, I should have actually, if I'd been thinking, I would have called when I was submitting them for publication, which I did. I should have actually called The Big Over Easy did Da Vinci kill Humpty Dumpty? Because at the time, anything with Da Vinci in the title was really selling really well. So I sort of missed a bit of a trick there, I think. But anyway, so we published those two, and that was really good. And it was quite interesting for me because I thought, oh ho ho, look, I've already written these books. That's going to be great. I'll just take them out. I'll just spell check them, and then that'll be fine. But I reread them for publication. It was like, oh yeah, okay, it's a good idea for a book, but it wasn't a very good book, and I sort of suddenly understood why they weren't published, because they weren't good enough, and that's interestingly, because I was 13 years trying to get published, writing and trying to get published, which is a long time, but not unusual when it comes to authors. And it wasn't me being rejected because they didn't understand my massive talent. It was me being rejected because I wasn't good enough yet. And anyone who's got children, I'm sure you have done that thing, where kids have this way of saying, "Oh, I can't do it," and annoyingly, I always say to my children, "Yet." You can't do that yet, and it's actually a really good thing to say because it's all about it's not about natural talent. It's just about work. It's just about putting in the work, and that's why you get better. So anyway, so it just wasn't good enough. So I rewrote them, which was great fun, and I had a lot of fun rewriting them. Anyway, so after that they said, right, book 7. What are you going to do, Fforde? And I said, I thought to myself, well, actually, the first 6 books, if you think about it, with the Thursday Next and the 2 Nursery Crime, what I'm doing is I'm kind of moving familiar furniture around in your head, right? That's the conceit, that's the thing, right? So I thought, I'm an author, I should be writing my own plot with my own characters, my own ideas that doesn't relate to anything before, and I won't have to steal anyone's literary masterpieces. I can actually write my own novel. And I thought, okay, well, I had this idea. I'd written a short story years ago called On Call with Robin Oker, which was about a colour feed pipe engineer who was repairing colour feed pipes, and that was it. And I thought, here's an idea. And I tend to write, and this I might have mentioned this before, is that my writing, the way in which I write is by something called the narrative dare. Right, and the narrative dare means that I set myself basically a concept, right, and then I write about it. So, and I only discovered this quite late on. And the thing about writing, and the thing about a lot of, I would think probably all self-learned creative endeavour, is you don't really know how you did it until after you've done it, and then people say, "How did you do that?" And you go, "Well, I did and then you kind of talk about it, and you go, "Yeah, that's probably actually quite true." So because I'm a self-taught writer, I never went to any writing courses and everything. I'm dyslexic, right? So my schooling ended fairly early. Didn't go to university, all that kind of stuff. Hated school. So I'm self-taught when it comes to writing, and perhaps that's why my writing is a little bit off kilter. Because I never had anyone said, "Oh, you can't do that," which is actually a really good thing to have. It means it takes a bit longer, and there's a likelihood you may not be published. But these books are very much mine. They are very much how I sort of see the world. There's this kind of absurd smorgasbord of human weirdness, that you can have fun with. Anyway, so the narrative dare. So the narrative dare, obviously, for the Eyre affair was Jane Eyre has been kidnapped from the original manuscript, and everyone's books are blank from the page 200 onwards. Someone has to get her back. Simple, really, isn't it? Right. The narrative dare to the 4th bear is explain the porridge temperature differential. That is the narrative dare, which I did, I thought, rather neatly, actually. And I think I explained it about two-thirds of the way through the book, but of course there's so much, I couldn't end the book there, obviously, but there's so much else going on with cucular energy and, and all that kind of, the gingerbread man, who's great fun, that I obviously had to carry it on and everything, and the whole gingerbread man, cookie, biscuit, and you think that's me being silly, but of course it's vital to the plot. And of course when the no spoilers here, but when the gingerbread man meets his end, of course, that's exactly how he meets his end, and you should have known, really. You really should have seen that one coming, because that's what happens, and that's why it's vital to know whether he's a biscuit or a cookie. This is what I love about writing. That's what I really love about writing, about moving furniture in people's heads. Anyway, so the narrative dare for Shades of Grey was create a sort of world order based entirely on visual colour. Right, that was the dare. And the point about why I call them a narrative dare, not a narrative task, is that a narrative dare means you can't not do it. Right, so if you had an elder sibling who dared you to jump out of an upstairs window, you would have to do it. No matter whether you got a twisted ankle, and you'd eventually get your own back. It might have taken decades, but you did get your own back by being better and selling more books, perhaps. But you got there in the end. But the point of the whole childish thing about a dare, and of course, you shouldn't do dares because someone says, but that's how kids work often, or I did. But when it comes to writing, and this is where it's a little bit more serious, because there is obviously a serious side to a lot of what I do, but a lot of sort of nonsense as well. But if you can't let yourself off the hook, right, and an idea isn't working, you have to rummage deeper in that authorial toolbox. A screwdriver, a spanner, you can figure out how they work, a hammer, But then there's other tools in the toolbox that you don't know the shape of, you don't know the name of. And you start using those, like inferred narratives and, that kind of stuff, intertextuality, which I think I know what it is, but I'm not sure. When you start using those, then you start really having fun with the structure of a sort of comedy novel, which is, I think, where perhaps, a lot of these ideas work. I mean, a very simple one, of course, is the whole thing about perhaps Humpty Dumpty, right? Humpty Dumpty, right? Large eggs don't work in our world, right? They don't. I mean, I've never seen one, not yet. But they do work in a world in which there are lots of nursery rhyme characters, right? So, the place you hide a stick is a forest, obviously. No one will ever find a stick in a forest. Don't try and hide a stick in a desert, right? They will really find it, right? But you can hide it in a forest. And if you've got a silly idea and you want to hide it, or you want to obscure it, or you want to make it normal, you want to normalize it, because when you're writing fantasy, you are normalizing the fantastic, right? Because the people inside the fantasy novel, they don't think it's fantasy. To them, it's normal. So, of course, the world in which Humpty Dumpty lives in exactly the same world as the world in which Thursday lives, or in The Constant Rabbit, in The Rabbits Live, it's normalized. So the world in which they live is essentially a way to make it normal. So that's kind of what I do. So anyway, Red Side Story. So the visual colour. Now I love the idea of visual colour because it's an abstract concept. Right, there is no colour in the real world. Okay, there is no colour in the real world. It's like there's no sound in the real world. There's just motion of material. That's all it is. So that thing about the tree falling in the forest does make a sound? No, of course it doesn't. Unless there's something there to hear it. Because if it's perceived, then it's sound. If it's not perceived, it's not sound. It's just motion of material. And it's the same way with colour. So back home, in all your front rooms, unless you have a cat or a dog or a hamster or something that can perceive colour, there is no colour in your front room at home. Nothing, none at all, because there's nothing there to perceive it. So I really like that idea, that it's just a sensation in our head. It's how we clothe the world. It's how we perceive the world. So to take that abstract concept and make it front and centre in this society, I thought was really good fun. So I pushed the boat out a little, and we had a health service based on colour-based health service, colour-based economy, which I quite like the idea of, and aspirational colour. Is another great one that I really, really enjoy. And it's kind of one that slightly flies under the radar, but you're told that you want this colorized world, that this is what you aspire to, and this is what we're working towards. And when the whole world is colorized, it's going to be amazing, but you're going to have to work hard and really concentrate and not do other stuff. you know. So it's kind of pernicious, you know. And I kind of, in the way I do, I added other stuff about the Book of Months and things like that. Anyway, so the book came out, and I had high hopes for it. I was very, you know, usually I think my books are going to do quite badly. But this one I thought, yeah, I think this could, I quite like this book, and I think it could do quite well. It didn't. It didn't. The people who bought it and read it liked it, right? And the reviews were solid and everything was pretty good. But I think readers, not you people, obviously, other readers, you know, other readers who aren't here now for obvious reasons, shame, clearly. People wanted me mucking around with the furniture in their heads, right? Yeah. And that was my shtick, and I'd moved off shtick, right? And I didn't realise that if you moved off shtick, even if you were the same person, then people may not follow you, and they didn't. So we went back to doing Thursday stuff, and I did some kids' books and stuff like that, and it kind of fell into abeyance, this notion of the sequel to Shades of Grey. And about sort of 4 years later, and I always got sporadic emails saying, "Dear Jasper, you know, I did like Shades of Grey. You know, when are you going to do the sequel? Yours generously, there." And I get those, but then after about 4 or 5 years, they suddenly start increasing, you know. And then by 7 years, they're kind of coming in on a sort of weekly basis, you know, and becoming a little bit more sort of, you know, politely aggressive. Then passive aggressive,
and aggressive,
and then you know, Jasper, I'm going to be dead in 20 years. I'd really like to know what happens, you know. So guilt aggressive, and then I got to the point where it was like I would like to know what happens, and I would like Jane and Eddie to come out again. So I went back to it. I actually said to my editor, my UK editor, to whom it is dedicated. I said, like, I'm going to do the sequel to Shades of Grey. And she went, "Oh, thank God for that." Because she's been my editor for 16 years, or she was for 16 years. And she said, "Oh, thanks God for that. I really wanted to know what was going to happen." So I did. So it was a question.
Should have been yelling at her? Is that what you're saying?
Well, she's really good, because she was very, you know, just let me do my own thing, which was kind of nice. So anyway, so I had to reread, obviously, Shades of Grey. Reread it about 4 times. I do most of my reading on audio, you know, because of the dyslexia. I didn't realise until I actually found out I was, that it was much harder for me to read books than other people. And I'd always been suspicious, you know, because someone says, "Oh, I read that book, you know, in an afternoon." It's like, how did you do that? So I listened to them audio, and that's how I love listening to books. I mostly listen to them, and it is reading. So don't let anyone tell you. Well, you know, you're not really reading the book, you're just listening to it, and it's like, no, it is reading. It is reading. So I reread Red Side Story, not Red Side Story, Shades of Grey. I reread it several times. Made copious notes because I'd kind of forgotten what was going on. Right, I hadn't completely forgotten where we were going with the world, but I'd kind of forgotten sort of how I thought we might get there. I do kind of write, I just make things up as I go along. I don't have plans. And one of the tenets by which I write by is called the no plan, right? Which is a great plan to have. Because if you don't have a plan, you need to have a plan for the fact that you have no plan, right? And the no plan sort of works in that I put in lots of little ideas that could be used but might not, right? Because if I use them, you go, "Oh yes, I remember this from the first book. Of course, it was there all along. He must have a huge brain." It's like if there's an author who says they had all 7 books mapped out in their head before they wrote them. No, they didn't. They didn't. They just made them all fit together. If you've read the, I can be honest here. Yeah, you're amongst friends. You're not going to tell. So if you read my Last Dragon Slayer series, right? No idea where that was going at all. And the 4th, which I think ties them all together quite well, was me essentially going, how do I tie this all together so it makes sense? So I went through the previous 3 books and just put it all together, and it looks like it works as a series. It does. It didn't. It doesn't. That was me just putting it all together to make it work as a series. And I think it did actually work. The final book, I quite liked it. Anyway, so there was I going through it. Now, I don't want to do. I know a few people have read the book, but obviously I don't want to do any spoilers here. But I think one of the important things was that I was writing a book. I'm writing a sequel to a book I wrote nearly 14 years ago, right? 14, 15 years ago. And I think I was maybe a bit of a slightly different author then. I think I'm a little bit more thoughtful now, and I might improve tiny bit. And books like Early Riser and The Constant Rabbit have come out since, and I kind of liked those books about what they were trying to do, really, in the subtext. So telling stories in the subtext about, allegorical stories, which, obviously The Constant Rabbit was one. So the Red Side Story tries to bring that me together with the previous me to try and, bring us into a position for book 3, which is definitely going to happen.
All right.
It's not going to be another 14 years.
Also,
and puts me in a position where I can write the 3rd book, which I think is going. For those people who have read Red Side Story, you sort of have an idea where it's heading, and there's some really good narrative challenges there. Some narrative dares that I can play with. So we're sort of really going place with that. So it was really a question of looking at the obvious things in the first book, which don't add up, right? That don't add up to this world. Things like the swans. They come over at exactly the same time. They do a figure of 8, and then they leave. And you're not meant to mess with them because they'll break your arm, and they're very dangerous, and they carry off small children, and all these sort of things that'll frighten us. There's also the fallen man, and it's very obvious that the fallen man is clearly in an ejector seat that he failed to get out of, but fell to earth only 13 or 14 years ago, and the old order, the previous, was meant to have died out 500 years ago. So clearly, there is something else about this world that we don't understand. And I kind of also like the idea, and I'll try and say a few sort of things from it without, again, doing spoilers. I think there was a sort of point in it where the first book is very much Jane kind of knowing everything without seemingly any way. Kind of like, if you remember Ford Prefect from the Hitchhiker's Guide, who seemed to know, who seemed to know everything, but you can't really see how he ever attained that knowledge. Just seemed to know everything. And I kind of like the idea that Jane, obviously in the first book, knew stuff, and Eddie didn't. He was like completely, I won't say green, that's the wrong word. Because he wasn't, he was completely red. And he was unquestioning, and he was incurious, and I kind of like that idea. But in the second book, I thought, okay, Jane, know it all. I want to create a world in which you had no idea, that you were only seeing a small part of the world, that it was much, much larger. And I don't know whether you've been to any really, really swish theatres where they have like 3 curtains, and the first curtains move, and then the second one, and then the third one moves up behind, and it's very impressive. I kind of wanted it like that, that there was stuff that Jane didn't know, because then we really, really don't know what's going on. So I wanted to do that. I think there was also an element, and I put this on my social media, so it's not a secret or anything, but for the last nearly 6-7 years, I was looking after my mother who had dementia, right, who had Alzheimer's. And that's now come to an end, as these things inevitably do. But and anyway, for those people who have been living with issues like this, or even illnesses with relatives, will know that there is a plan, right? And you have a plan, and it's a great plan until it's not a great plan. It doesn't work anymore, and then you pivot to a new plan, right? And then that could be a great plan for a year, or 2 weeks, or a day, and it has to change again, and you have to pivot again. And the old plan is like you just forget it, You know, if you just put in I don't know, you've just spent a lot of money putting in a wet room upstairs and mum moves downstairs literally a week later, doesn't matter. The plan was good, but now we have a new plan. And that's, you know, a way, and, you know, there's a lot of nodding heads there. So, you know, you've been there and you understand, and, you know, I feel for you. And it's hard. It's really, really hard.
Vice versa.
Yeah. So, so I wanted to bring that into the book. Right. So there was I don't really remember it. There was a sequence in, I think it was LA Law, where they got rid of an actor by having her fall down a lift shaft. Right. Do you remember that? Yeah. It was bizarre. And it was quite a really, really good way to get rid of an actor who they clearly had a disagreement with. I don't know what she did to upset the writers and the producers, but it must have been pretty fierce, like asking for money or something like that. You know, they had to go down a lift shaft. But the point about it was that all the subplots that had been running died with her. And they had to kind of pivot to all these new stories. And I kind of like that idea. It was really, really bold. So in Red Side Story, you know, things are going along and then they change. And it's like, oh, okay, we're going in this direction now. And then they change again. And then they change again. And then they change again. So I really wanted to get that kind of feel in it. And it kind of worked. So that was quite nice. What else about Red Side Story? We feature Shakespeare. I put some notes in my reading copy. I'll just have a quick look. Let's have a look. No plan, got that. Narrative dare, got that. Logical progression of an idea, we didn't talk about that. Less well-trodden path, we didn't talk about that either, did we? Dog warmer. Yeah, I wonder why I put dog warmer in. Oh, that was new words. Do you make up words? I'm sure you do. You're all like really smart people. I really like individual family vocabularies. Yeah, I mean that I do this a lot, and I'm sure you guys do as well. The one that I do at the moment, and anyone who has teenage children will instantly know this one, is that a dad taxi service or mum taxi service. We call them a Duba and a Mooba. A Duba, a Mooba, and Gruber as well. We have, but they're more instant than an Uber, because with an Uber it's like, oh, I have to wait 10 minutes. Like, no. With teenage, it's like, Dad, can you pick me up like now? It's like, I'm right. Yeah, and a dog warmer is what we call the wood burning stove. Which is dog warmer. Stair mold is when the dog sleeps on the fourth step. You get that? Yeah, we call it stair mold. Yeah, but I don't know why I wrote that down. I've also got here, look, sentences you don't want to hear. See, this is what amuses me when I'm on an aeroplane. It's like, what sentence would you not want to hear? And I wrote down 3 here. Can you smell gas? It'd be quite a good one, wouldn't it? Right, and the other one is how about this one? Is that a bear? Again, you don't want to hear. Or this one as well, which I quite like, actually. Do you know, the last time I got this tingling sensation was just before I was struck by lightning. You can see that's what amuses me. I was talking about Shakespeare. I talked briefly about Shakespeare because it kind of elevates the conversation a little bit. I think Shakespeare is obviously great, and we love Shakespeare, and we love the adaptations of Shakespeare, and that's why Shakespeare is so wonderful, because endlessly adaptive, and even now, you know, Shakespeare turns up in teen movies, you know, which is I think is just terrific. Shakespeare does turn up in my books quite a lot, and I think what's interesting about them is that they become sort of touchstones for the way in which Shakespeare would be perceived within the book. So in the Thursday book, you have the Richard III audience participation, which is exactly how Shakespeare would be done in Thursday's world. So not only do I bring it in and sort of it makes me seem a little highbrow, but you know, this sort of delusion. But also, it's kind of exposition without actually writing exposition, if you like. And I also did it in Early Riser. Narrative Dare is a writer thriller set in a world in which humans have always hibernated. Right, that's the narrative dare, which is also my only elevator pitch. But not if I was falling down an elevator. It would be a much shorter pitch, unless it was a long elevator. Yeah. Higher pitch. So So in Early Riser, we have Shakespeare, because Shakespeare would have hibernated. So that the Romeo and Juliet that features in Shakespeare, in Early Riser, is how it would appear within the framework of that book. And of course, I had to then put Romeo and Juliet in this book. And the travelling players, who I talked about, and I do like the idea of travelling players, and they come along and they do little morality plays, and sort of almost like commercials and little vignettes, which are obviously to promote, the collective. So that the I lost my place. So that the name of the I really have lost my place. It's terrible, isn't it? I took the postcard out, and it's anyway. It's called something like. Hang on, I'll get there in a sec. I'll just keep talking. Politicians do this, isn't it? When they're being interviewed, they keep on talking so that the interviewer can't come in and ask an awkward question.
It's subtle, no one can notice.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, they call it in this world. It's called the tragedy of the chromatically non-compliant and clearly idiotic Romeo and Juliet. And I kind of like that idea that it's told in a way that shows how stupid they are. And that they're from two different households, and they're non-compliant in colour, so they're complementary colours, and they shouldn't be together. And that's how the whole play works, which I quite enjoy. Anyway, let's have some questions. Who's got? Okay. Oh, who? I think we were first here in the front row. So yes.
I want to ask a question, but I don't want to ask any spoilers because I have read the book.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
just put your spoiler filter on. Yeah.
Okay. I loved the whimsy in the first book. I loved just going with it and like being in this whole different, no furniture, just totally redecorated world. And then I loved how the plot progressed in this book, and things obviously, that's what how much of that whimsy was actually whimsy at the time, and how much was sitting there waiting to get turned on? And maybe
Okay. It's sort of whimsy question, really. A question about whimsy. How do we define whimsy?
I can't say the specifics because they're spoilers.
So the question was really about sort of carrying over the sort of whimsical, and I think when you talk of whimsical, because it comes around quite a lot. People talk, whimsical. I think is it kind of having fun with stuff in a way? I don't know whether we define whimsy in that way.
Off kilter, like you were talking just about the swans, and you were talking, they do figure eights, and then they steal toddlers.
Yeah.
And then there's things that become more concrete in the second.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how many of those you actually planted, knowing where they were headed,
versus
this is fun, and then now 10 years later, a decade later.
Okay, no, I get what you're saying. Okay, so it was just about how many of the concepts that appear to be whimsical in the first ones then come through to the second book as actually much more concrete and serious. I think also I think it sort of really goes towards a sense of sort of trying to fly serious ideas under the radar by making them slightly silly. And I think if you make ideas slightly silly or slightly whimsical, I think people maybe you can be nicely wrong-footed, because it's what I think authors tend to try and do is, and especially it's no fun with, say, a crime thriller if you figured it out. Right, there's no fun to that. But also, there's no fun if you couldn't have figured it out, right? You had to have been able to figure it out as long as you'd seen all the clues, which were there in front of your face. And I think it goes towards, I suppose, a very sort of complex issue, which is the unseen compact between the reader and the writer, right? I mean, the compact is, I can't have someone appear, like 3 pages from the end, and suddenly come in and sort everything out, because it's just, you just can't do that. It's just not allowed.
Except on LA Law.
That's on LA Law, and Dickens, Charles Dickens. He used to do it quite a lot, right at the very end. And to be fair, Dickens was writing episodically, right, and publishing episodically. So he didn't have a chance to go back and rewrite. So the final episode was basically people turning up completely by coincidence and explaining where they've been for the last, 25,000 words or 250,000 words, and why they didn't do what they said they were going to do in the first chapter. So I think like what I was saying about the no plan, is that I put these things in and I thought, yeah, that's going to work. The swans are really going to work, but I'm going to hide them. And a lot of the time, going back to hiding sticks in forests, is if you have these ideas which are slightly hidden, then when they become more serious and more relevant, you go, okay. And I think that's sometimes true in real life, and I'm struggling to find an example. But there's all kinds of very absurd things that we do as humans, which we kind of just do because we've done them. And then when we actually sort of stop and think about it, why do we do that? I mean, we have hot and cold taps in the UK, right? You have mixers here, don't you? You don't have a hot and a cold tap. Do you sometimes have that? Yeah. Why would we do that? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. They should all be mixers, shouldn't they? And I'm sure I could think of a few more examples, but there's some very odd things that we do. So I think it was really when I was writing it, the second book, I was going through and saying, right, this I'm going to use, this I'm not going to use, this I'm going to use, and this one I could use even further down the line. There are a few ideas that I didn't use because I could have taken Eddie. I think one of the ideas I had when I was writing the first book was for him to get to national colour, right?
Yeah.
And that was something that I thought I could do, and I'll put that in there because he has an aspiration to go to national colour, and there's a whole dialogue with the colour man about if you do this, you'll get to national colour. So that was a possibility, right? And because I don't know where I'm going, and I have this no plan, I put everything in. But as it turned out, in 120,000 words, I had other things I decided I want to do, and I didn't want Eddie to go to national colour. But it doesn't mean that it's a sort of a hanging plot point, because he can still have the aspiration, and he still does have the aspiration, or he did, until things happened. But a lot of the time when I was writing number 2, I was finding that I was looking through the book and I was going, okay, they were kind of responsible for killing Cortland Gamboge, and there's no way there's not any consequences. So a lot of the thrust of the first third of the book almost is the rest of the village trying to get them into the green room because they think they did Cortland Gamboge in, because that's Sally Gamboge's son. So, it's a lot of it is like, we don't have time to do a lot of this stuff because you've got this sort of localized terror and all these things hanging over from book 1, which I kind of enjoyed, actually. So, I don't know if that answers your question. Right, we had a very enthusiastic hand.
So the past couple of books, not all of them, you used to have these little sleuthing challenges where you had ask questions and,
I did.
People would submit their answers and I always enjoyed failing miserably. Do you have plans for resurrecting that practice?
I mean, until you actually mentioned it, I kind of forgotten all about it. But yeah, I did have a sleuthing challenge, and I used to put in little things in the books that you had to kind of figure out. I mean, I could do that again. But oftentimes I have ideas and I do it for a bit. I mean, if anyone follows my Instagram, you'll know that I did a ceiling of the week, and that kind of obsessed me for about 2 years, and then I got bored. And then I did a whole series. I think it was about maybe like 2 tours ago in the US, where I was doing hotel lobby carpet grates. And I do those occasionally, and it's not just the picture of the carpet that I enjoyed. It was making up some complete plausibly serious nonsense, that went with it. Making up some agency that looks after carpets, for Delta and stuff like that. And I kind of enjoyed that sort of stuff. So but yeah, I mean, I could do a sleuthing thing again, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know. It's just things that amuse me at the time. And I just thank you. Thank you. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I will take it. I will think about it. Yes, thank you. Yes, maybe, perhaps, we'll see. Yeah, you can see I'm parent.
Perhaps. You are clearly committing yourself one way or the other.
But perhaps we'll see. If you're good. Okay. Yes. Sorry. Question. Yes.
No, I mean, the thing that really drew me in with the Shades of Grey and kept me wondering, why, and I read it as many times apparently as you have or more. Was when I was 13 or 14 years old, I had this whole idea all of a sudden of who gets to decide that red is red.
Yeah.
And I mean, is my red exactly the same as your red? And where on the the CMYK scale, or the Pantone scale is all that. So I think that the concepts that you bring in are so incredibly deep at some levels, and yet the joy you have and the irreverence that you have, or as the lady next to me said, the whimsy that you bring in, the play of the language is what I truly enjoy. I mean, you have the allegorical things. I think of Constant Rabbit as the 2020 version of Watership Down.
Yeah.
I mean, it is truly an allegorical story about forms of government and personal responsibility.
Yeah. Well, I described Constant Rabbit as District 9 meets Watership Down. District 9 is an amazingly good film.
Yes.
I mean, it is a staggeringly good film. And lightning did not strike again. And that's bizarre when it comes to filmmaking like that, because sometimes filmmakers just do a fabulous movie and then it all goes horribly wrong. And you wonder how it all went so horribly right the first time. There's I think it's Martin McDonagh who made In Bruges.
Yes.
Right? See, In Bruges, again, it's a staggeringly good film because it's about essentially friendship and redemption. It's brilliant. No. And after that, maybe you like these latest films. I couldn't stand any of them. And they were never of the quality of In Bruges, which is just perfect, So, I don't know, what was I saying? Anyway, what was I saying? I can't remember. Constant Rabbit, that was it. I still got Constant Rabbit. Anyway, sorry, your question.
But the plot point that, now that you have promised us a third book in the reasonably near future.
Yeah.
Like, we all heard that, right?
Yeah, you did.
What I want to see is, where I thought we were going with this was, at the end you had this plot point where it appeared that Eddie had come across the idea of a spork.
Oh, right, yeah. I didn't use that one.
And I thought East Carmine was going to get rich, and Eddie was going to National Color, and I want to see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's all right. Spork was in the first book. You haven't read the first book. No,
It's not a spoiler for the second.
Again,
Spork was in the first.
It's ideas I could have used. I could have used it, and I think I mention it in the second book just to say yes, it is there, but I didn't use it. It's interesting you're talking about, sure we all did as children, wondered whether the red that we saw was the red that everyone else saw.
But
sadly, we're not. You can take it even further than that, because people are talking about, will AI ever be conscious, right? And in fact, when you look at it, you only know of one person who's conscious, for sure. Right. I only know for sure it's me. Right. You guys only know for sure it's you. But I don't know that any of you are conscious. Right. I can't tell. I don't know. It would seem likely, given the evidence. But I don't.
We bought your book.
Yeah, you bought it. Well, I don't know. Is that for or against? I'm not sure. But it's quite interesting. Another good one that I'd say is why we're so similar is I wonder how many people here, when they were very small children, imagined that there might be something under the bed that would grab your ankles, right, as you got out of bed. Okay, so we all kind of thought that, but how many of you actually used to jump from the bed, like 2 or 3 foot? Anyone else?
No, I hung upside down and stuff.
Exactly. And these things are really, really, we share so much as humans. And I think that's how reading and writing works. I think this is the closest thing to telepathy that we have, because essentially it's little squiggles on a page, and I don't describe that much. I'm just sort of describing things in rough sort of, and you don't want to describe too much, because I want the pictures to be built in your head. That you construct it in your head, That's why, when, I don't want to diss Tolkien, but, 3 pages to describe a meadow, okay. If you're into that sort of thing, great. But, meadow for me is you should be able to do it in a couple of words, really, and let the reader make the meadow, because they've probably seen meadows, I think, and it's because we have so many shared experiences that writing manages to work, and reading and writing, it's a wonderful thing. And look at it, and look around us. This isn't going away, folks. Books, no matter what anyone says, they ain't going away. a fundamental need for humans. I was upstate New York a few years back, and it was one of those places that was really, really wealthy. And it was like, used to be like a little town, and it was like really wealthy. And down the street, I was trying to find, and I was looking at all these places, and there were, in this big main street, there were like, I think 3 shops that sold outfits for pets. So you could dress up your Labrador as an elf or something. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start looking for a shop that sells something that's important to life, right? Because all the food shops are now were like 2 blocks down that way, you know. So the main drag was all basically crystals and bad paintings and stuff like that. And what I found were bookshops. You know, you go, okay, I found it. So there we go. You know, it's a lot of coffee shops, a lot of coffee. But anyway, okay, another question. Sorry, yes.
In the Thursday Next book, Something Rotten, I love how you have the grandmother. She says she can't die until she's read the 10 most boring books.
Yes.
Did you have a list?
Well, I think I put a few in there. I think I might have put Pamela in there. Paradise Lost, I think. And then I think I put in Moby Dick. And that was quite interesting because that actually got me someone who's mildly irked. Which is a kind of very British thing. You know, we don't do anger, we get mildly irked, you know, and that's our sort of, you know, DEFCON 3 for us, you know. It goes from, you know, slightly huffy to mildly irked, you know. And he said to me, now look, Jasper, look, you know, you said that Moby Dick was, you know, one of the most boring books, and it isn't, you know, it's a classic, it's an American classic. And I thought, you know, oh goodness, you know, I could be like stabbed or something by some deranged Moby Dick fan, some Melvilleite, you know.
Harpooned by a Melvilleite.
And I thought, well, I should defend my words. And luckily I had read Moby Dick, and I said, okay, we have an entire chapter which is Father Maple's speech. Can you honestly, hand on heart, tell me that is the most riveting chapter in the American literary tradition, like that? And he sort of stared at me, and he went, okay, yeah, it is a little boring. But that chapter is pretty tedious. It has to be said. I don't think I had a list in mind, but I think the bigger joke that I was making is that not all the classics are good.
Yeah.
You know, there's some really bad classics out there. You know, and sadly, some of them are actually taught to students, which is wrong. I think we should be sort of, you know, teaching proper books, you know, rather than sort of the boring ones. So I think you can make up your own list. You know, books you were forced to read as a child and just despised. You know, I'm not a big fan of Wuthering Heights, I have to say. You know, that's why we have the rage counselling session within Thursday. I mean, it just annoyed me. If only she'd written another book, you know, it would have been great. But it would have been a comedy, you know, really interesting comedy. But the Brontes were probably about as famous for dying as they were for writing. You know, they did a lot of that. They did a lot of that. Anyway, we had another question. Yeah.
Well, the Brontes all died because of swamp water. They actually recently figured that out.
What, swamp water?
Swamp water. Yep.
Really?
There was a local graveyard, and that's where they're pulling the water from.
Yeah.
So it was just killing all of them.
Yeah. Well, it was in an era when people died a lot. It really was. Well, I remember that.
Less than 100% of them died.
Yeah.
So, aside from Douglas Adams, like what books do you read, and you're like, I wish I'd written that chapter.
Okay. Which books do I read? I would sort of probably say that. I mean, this is a question that comes up a lot. It's like, you know, who do you look as your writing inspirations? And I usually say, well, if you only look to writing, then, you know, books, then you're selling yourself woefully short, right? Because there's you know, radio comedy, TV comedy, things people say on the bus, things that you overhear, you know, when you're waiting at gate, you know, 74 at Atlanta Airport, and there's jokes, and there's Calvin and Hobbes, and there's everything, you know. So I like to think that, you know, I sort of steal from everywhere, you know, and I think that's the right way to do it. Paintings, you know, really beautiful paintings. You know, I was looking at, I can't remember. I went into MoMA in New York when I was there, and there's that amazing painting, real iconic sort of American art of I can't remember, Weifer, I think, who painted it. And there's a lady on the foreground who's got a hand up, and it's in an empty wheat field.
Yeah.
So which one?
Christina's World. Yeah.
Christina, right?
Yeah.
That one. And right in the top right-hand corner is a little shed, a little barn and a house and everything. And I was looking at that painting, and I was staring at it, and it was one of those ones that you can get really close to, which I really like. And I was getting really close, and the detail in that little house in the top right-hand corner was astonishing. And there was a washing line with one piece of washing on it.
Wow.
You know, and I was going, there's so much more here, and how can I use this somehow? It was very exciting and interesting. So, you know, you just go sort of to everywhere. But if you want a book that I sort of read and, oh, sorry, I got a text from Vodafone telling me that my phone isn't working. I mean, if you want a book that I really, really love that isn't the obvious ones, because I could say the obvious books, you know, like sort of Slaughterhouse 5 and, you know, Catch-22 and 1984 and, you know, everyone always says how fantastic. But a book that I adore and I read, you know, quite a lot on a sort of, one of the few books I read on a regular basis is True Grit by Charles Portis. And that is one of those books, because I was talking actually, and someone said, do you have any opening passages of books? You know, what's the best opener? And there's the opening of that is really good. It's a killer first paragraph about you know, basically about how a coward going by the name of Tom Cheney had killed her father, stolen his money and his horse and 2 gold pieces that he kept in his waistband. And it's a staggeringly good book from so many different levels. You know, it's Mattie Ross. She's 14. She is headstrong. She's an astonishingly sharp character. There's no one to match her intellect and sharpness within the entire book. But it's kind of her as imagined by the older her telling the story. So there are elements of a kind of slightly false narrative about it that you're not sure, and it's about heroes and legends, you know. And I just adore it, and the language is so beautiful. And the Coen brothers did a great job in that book, in that film. Who was Kim Darby was in the first one, and the second one was who was it? Haley Steinfeld. That's right. It's a Haley Steinfeld version and the Kim Darby version. And it's very notable that you should always define the films by the protagonist and not by the secondary male star. Right? Because most people say the John Wayne one. Right? No, it was the Kim Darby version. So we just put that in your head. You know, it's important. Right? Haley Steinfeld. Thank you. And I've been watching Haley Steinfeld ever since, and it's like, she does not have the roles. It must be so frustrating to do such a fantastic job, like almost out the gate. You know, I mean, it wasn't the first job in her career, almost out the gate. And she gets a couple of jobs, and a couple of jobs that she does really, really well. And it's like not the material, and she ends up doing Bumblebee, for God's sake, you know. And it's like, I understand why you have to do this stuff. You know, you're a working actress, but what a shame, you know. What a shame that there weren't the really good roles.
She could play Jane.
Yes. yeah, she'd be great. She would be great. Right. So last question. Then we will have to wrap it up. I think you had your hand up. Yeah.
So in Well Lost Plots, you were allowed to use in a small scene Temperance Brennan from Kathy Reich's series.
Yeah.
Are there any other non-public domain characters that you would like to have pop up in the next Thursday Next?
The character exchange program. Yeah. That would have been a great sort of. Wouldn't it have been great if, you know, if I'd been, you know, I think I've sold maybe like, I don't know, 5 million copies around the world at the moment, which is great. Obviously, I'm very grateful. However, if I'd sold like 30 million, then I would be doing character exchange programs with leading authors, which I think could have been, Jack Reacher, that sort of stuff. Because Jasper, he sells billions of copies, so we can do that. So it's one of those things that would have happened, I don't know. So I don't think so. I mean, I'm pleased that Winnie the Pooh is now in public domain. So I couldn't use Eeyore the last time round, but I can use Eeyore this time round. Right. So that's good, but not Eeyore as Eeyore appears in the Disney version. Eeyore as Eeyore appears in the book. It just sort of struck in my head in that in the sort of what might have been, the amazing things that might have been. I don't know whether you saw. And the film Annie Hall, the Woody Allen film Annie Hall, and he's in a cinema queue, and there's this guy behind him pontificating about stuff, and he's really annoyed about it. And then this bloke starts banging on about Marshall McLuhan, right? And he goes, well, you know nothing about what you're talking. And so, well, I actually happen to have Marshall McLuhan with me. And he brings out Marshall McLuhan, and Marshall McLuhan says, you know nothing of my work. Like this. and Woody Allen turns to the camera and says, if only life were like this. Right? He didn't want Marshall McLuhan, right? He wanted Orson Welles. And Orson Welles was his second choice because he wanted, I think, Bertolucci. If it had been Bertolucci, or Orson Welles, it would have been fantastic. Because when I watched that for the first time, I went, who the hell's Marshall McLuhan? So sometimes, you get these situations where it's like, that would have been really good if it happened, but it never happened. So I don't think it's going to happen, unless for some reason if you all buy 1 million copies of my book each, then it could happen, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen. Anyway, I should briefly mention, thank you, obviously, to the bookstore here. Thank you to Soho Press for rehoming an author in the States, which was brilliant. Thank you for them. There is a bonus chapter in the back of the US version, so all you people who bought American UK versions,
you got us.
You're gonna have to buy another one, and if you're got the audio version, if I can probably show you that it's not. This is an art. The bonus chapter is in a thank you. The bonus chapter is in a slightly different form, so it's actually hang on. I just did it as a report with annotations by a prefect. Right, so I don't know where you can see that. So it's kind of someone who's typed out a report about how, I won't give you any spoilers, about how one thing appears this way, and then a prefect has gone over it again and say, do you know what, I don't think this is on message. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't lend itself well to audio. So the lovely people at Soho Press, who have a fantastic audio department, said, Jasper, do you have any ideas about this? And I said, well, look, I could write a script and do it as a two-hander with me and my friend Brendan. Just book us a recording studio in Bristol. And that's what we did. So not that I'm telling you to buy 3 versions of but if you're someone who reads on audio, but maybe the same reason that I read on audio, you'll actually hear me yattering away with my friend Brendan doing it as a two-handed play that I wrote myself. So there you go, so a little few bonus extras. And of course, thank you to everyone here coming out and listening to me talk. It's brilliant. Thank you so much.
So we'll continue the signing line up back at the back like we had it before. I will add also, if your name is Daniel Ashlin, come to the front counter because we found something that belongs to you. Or if you know Daniel, you can also come and give us some information. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you.
Would you be the honor of having a selfie to get posted?
No, not at all. No, put it anything. And if you